How do you work remotely with trust, productivity, and privacy? Yes, we all are working remotely these days. That is offline or online, but not in person. And in that, usually there's a challenge. Is the person really doing work? And from person's perspective, is my privacy protected? And then there's the dimension of productivity because employer want productivity. They want to make sure that work is getting done. Now, all this requires a hands on or a basic human approach. So, going back to human values, going back to human behavior, addressing the questions of trust, of privacy, of productivity. And for that, who would be better suited than someone who has been a senior manager or in senior leadership position in motion pictures, in technology companies, and has set up a foundation or rather a company of his own and is helping improve productivity when working remotely. And I'm talking about Steven Puri, who's going to be with us and talking about all these aspects. And before we start, I think one more thing. We recently partnered with PECB and are offering now ISO courses, ISO standard courses. So do visit www.fit4privacy.com/PECB to explore what courses are available and take advantage of these.
Hello, and welcome to the Fit for Privacy Podcast with Punit Bhatia. This is the podcast for those who care about their privacy. Here, your host, Punit Bhatia, has conversations with industry leaders about their perspectives, ideas, and opinions relating to privacy, data protection, and related matters. Be aware that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not legal advice. Let us get started.
So, hello and welcome to another episode of the Fit for Privacy podcast. And today we have a special guest, Steven Puri. Welcome, Steven, to the Fit for Privacy podcast.
I hope we can have some fun today.
Absolutely. So, let's maybe start with a little bit of a change that has gone on in last 15, 20 years.
Mhm.
It used to be all in person, all face to face, and then
Mhm.
came the websites and now the AI. And it's becoming more digital, more remote, more hybrid, or
Mhm.
more not in person, if I call it. And in that new world, there's something we're starting to talk about saying, how do I trust the other person? Is it real? And nowadays, is it fake? Is it deep fake or whatever?
Yeah.
And in that context, how would you define this element of trust or digital trust, as people are saying?
It's interesting because in the platform that I built, we have an LLM assistant that helps you. And that is one of the things we wrestled with was to say, as the world has become more remote, and you and I are not sitting in the same conference room looking at each other talking, but sometimes we're on Zoom, sometimes we're in Slack or Teams, and sometimes I'm dealing with an AI agent of some sort, right? So how do you take the things that engender trust in that room? When I look at you, I go, oh, Punny, da, da, da. You're like, yes, I'll build that by Friday, and then you'll be enabled to build your thing by Monday, right? I trust you'll do that. And when you break that down into essentially the contracts that we have, because we have social
Mhm.
contracts, you know, I will not drive on your side of the road and kill you. It's a social contract that we mostly observe, right? And there are work contracts, which is I know you have a dependency on something I'm doing. I will make sure you're unblocked by this time in this way. And then I know I can do my work. Right. So there are a lot of contracts. And when we were developing our platform, and I can speak to this part of it because you have had very smart people on your podcast that have gotten very technical on this. But this is the thing I can speak of is the human part of it is it was really about looking at what are the contracts we have about if I look to our smart assistant in our platform and say, I want help with this task, or I want help organizing my tasks, what contracts are implicit in that? What do I assume will happen? Like my tasks are private to me, right? Because I would never entrust them in a public forum. And that the way in which they're being managed
Mhm.
prioritizes my priorities, not a system priority, not a platform priority. It's really, in my mind, the digital trust as it applies in my world is about looking what are the social contracts, what are the work contracts, and how do we take those and say they need to apply in this specific instance, which is how can I be productive? How can you help me be more productive?
That's a very good definition, I would say.
Oh, God,
Because
I passed the first test. This is great. Okay.
so because end of the day, when we talk about trust, trust is a human thing.
Mhm.
Even when we talk the digital dimension of trust, it's human. And humans usually have some I wouldn't say written, but unwritten rules based on which they trust, and everybody is unique in that sense. And you call that social contract. And in our technical language, in the legal world or premise, we call that the privacy or trust or digital trust. And that's what
Mhm.
we're talking in this world when it's deep fakes and AI and everything happening around
Mhm.
us. And more importantly, if I link it to the kind of work you do, there is this dimension when people are working, especially after Corona, in a remote world, in a
Mhm.
remote or hybrid world. People are at different places. Like it's been years since I recorded an in-person podcast.
Right.
And before
Yeah.
Corona, I was doing so. I was going to people's offices. We were setting up the cameras and all, but it's much more convenient to do it on the PC. So the same thing is happening with meetings. Same thing is happening with hiring. Same thing is happening with workplace. So
Mhm.
when people are working in this remote sense or remotely, let's put it, how would somebody establish trust? Because there are two dimensions. One is the productivity angle, which we will come to, but the starting point is, can I trust this person to do this job? How would you
Mhm.
define or create trust in a remote environment even before we start talking productivity?
I'm going to give you actually a slightly more broad answer that narrows into the answer you're asking. And I'll tell you this, as I mentioned, I have worked for 20 years in film in
Mhm.
between my engineering careers. So a lot of film and storytelling is trying to deeply understand what is the truth about another person and how do I tell that truth. And when you do it well, a billion people see it on screen and go, I feel that. I may not be that superhero. I may not be that swimmer in that movie. I may not be that, astronaut, but there was a truth about being human that was in that person that I feel you could feel in your chest, right? So very often when we're developing that, it does come down to these ideas of how does that character in the beginning of the movie establish the relationships around him or her? And that means building trust. So when that character says, I have to go fight the dragon, and he goes to his friend Punit and says, come with me, we're going to fight the dragon, that Punit has to somehow establish trust going, we're not going to get killed. I believe that you have the sword or you have the secret to the dragon's heart or something so that you'll come with me. So a very similar thing is, this is where I'm going to narrow this, is that same technique of saying, what are the small things you can do that then build into larger trust? The same thing, we want to do on our platform, which is say, as you accumulate small bits of trust that you validate, you then can offer bigger ideas of, well, now trust me with this. So if right out of the gate in a platform you say, I need your social security number, I need to have your visa number, I need your passport, right? Unless you're a government website, that's asking for too much trust, right? But if I were using a website that said, hey, you know what? Trust me with this data on your schedule for today. I'm going to optimize your calendar. Okay, if it does that for all, great. And then if it later says, you know what? Trust me with your credit card and I could execute these transactions for you, or I can line up transactions that you will approve. Like I may be agentic sort of AI, but you'll still have the approval step, right? And as you build that, you may very well get to the point where you say to it, hey, book me that trip to India. And it has my passport number and it has my credit card because it's built the trust. And I'm like, yes, approve, go book it. But I wouldn't say that on the first day.
That makes sense. So we talked about the trust being about me, the person, and then me, the other side, the other person also has a me, and the two people have to connect, and that connection happens through a story because the new person is telling a story. This is I, who I am. This is what I do, and the other person is asking some questions. That's where the social contract comes in. But social contract is a set of unwritten rules. You're asking something else, trying to validate something else, and then you build up a perception, build up the trust perspective in the mind, and then you say, as you gave an example, the passport and a trip to somewhere and something, those
Mm-hmm.
things. The question is, in a remote world, as you help people create or gain productivity, first question I would like to ask is, how do you help build this trust in a unwritten scenario? Because there's no written rules. You have to say this, you have to say that at that speed, don't do this, don't do that. So how do you take those mini baby steps to create that trust?
I think there are two parts to that. It's two sides. One side is understanding fundamentally what are the smallest steps to build trust, right? Which we've talked about is before you ask for your passport number, you prove you can do something on a lower level, like the calendar, right? The other side is you have to make sure that the person who needs to trust you has a need to trust you, right?
Mhm.
So if it is, to extend that example, if it is you are an AI, you're an agentic AI agent interacting with a human, right? And you need to get that passport number, that credit card to book a flight. You need to know that the human you're interacting with needs to book a flight. That push and pull need to be matched. And I'll tell you, this is one of the things that I've learned a lot in developing this platform in the last 6 years, which is the more you understand the problem, and the biggest cohort in my community is developers, is engineers, right? The more you understand the problems that they have, the more they're willing to participate, because if you solve that, the trust is very meaningful. It's not random trust, like I trust you'll get my mail. It is trust saying, oh, I have this. A good example, I hear this a lot. I have either cold start problem in the morning. Sometimes I know I need to get going at 9. I'm working remotely and I procrastinate. I'm going to check my email, or I pick up my phone, or I know I have to, put in a load of laundry or do the dishes or something. There's something that comes up that procrastinates in the morning, right? If you solve that, which is what we work at, then people trust you because they're like, oh, you actually helped me get going in the morning. I don't feel overwhelmed. I don't procrastinate. It's kind of fun to get going. And the same thing at the end of the day, the number of members who have told me, I used to have these days where at 6 o'clock, I feel down on myself. I look at my task list at what didn't get done, and I promise I'll get up early tomorrow and get a jump on the stuff I didn't get done and then do my stuff for tomorrow. And that's a lie you tell yourself. The days sort of tumble one into the other when you do that. So when you have a solution to those things, people are much more incentivized to trust you and say, oh, let me tell you what tasks I have to get done. Talk to the smart assistant in the platform and say, I need to do these 5 things today. Tell me the most efficient way to get through them, because I would like to be done at 3 o'clock, not at 6. And you do
Makes
that,
sense.
and trust is built.
Okay. So that basically goes down to the basics of human behavior, because I think it's the Just Listen book, the book called Just Listen, which said if you have to tell somebody something and you want them to listen to you, I think there are 3 elements. Like you said, they believe they have a need for that, they believe you have a solution for that, and they're confident, that means they trust you, that you are the one to help them fulfill that need. So it's exactly the same thing you're saying. So it goes down to the basics, even in the AI or the digital world. But your forte, your competence is to help people gain productivity in the remote world or the remote
Yes.
working.
Healthy
So,
productivity.
or healthy productivity. So how do you define this healthy productivity? What is it about?
Well, I'll tell you, there is a culture. I've spent a number of years working in San Francisco since I got back into
Mhm.
tech. And there's a culture there that celebrates pushing yourself too hard. Like there is a badge of honor to say, oh, I worked until 2 a.m. I slept at the office. I think I'm working with Mark in the early days of Facebook. Oh, this feels like working for Elon. And sometimes it's not necessarily about the output. It is about a celebration of how hard you're working. And the thing that I have been working to promote is the idea that work is what you do. It is your output. It is not how many hours you put in. It is not where you do it. It is not even what time of day you do it. It is to say, if I did something meaningful today in 6 hours that moved my company forward, I built the feature that is suddenly delighting users in a B2C, fashion, or I built the integration that saves us 1 penny on 1 billion transactions a day.
Mhm.
That's great if you did it in 6 hours. And you know what? I don't want you to take 12 hours to do it. I don't want you to have the exhaustion of 12 hours. I want to empower you to have the tools to do it in 6 and be refreshed. And the next day, do it again. Not the
Good.
next day, tell me you're burned out and you're quitting and you're going to another company.
Okay, so you focus on outcome rather than input, because traditionally the method has been you need to be here in the office at 8 or 9 and you need to
Correct.
stay till 5, 12 o'clock is your lunch time. And in a remote scenario, it's very hard to find out where you are, what you're doing. Of course, there are some people tracking screens and all, but that's invasion of privacy, and that's then leading to lack of trust and not helping. So
Completely.
you
I'm
say,
glad you said that. Yes.
this is the outcome I want. As
Mhm.
long as you deliver this outcome today, that's good for me. Or this
Yes.
week, that's good for me. These are the outcomes I want. So that's very nice and very interesting if you can focus work in that sense. But are companies or people willing to buy that? Because we also see, while there's the challenge of controlling people, there's
Mhm.
also the intent to control. So people want to feel in control.
Mhm.
And the factor of fear of missing out, that also plays, because people, some of the managers are so used to maintaining or managing people that they feel like, what do I do now?
Yes. Let's talk about leadership. because there is no tool that can overcome bad hiring. If you have hired the wrong people, you may say, oh, I'm going to have this surveillance software. I'm going to, get a click monitoring service. And, a bad employee is going to have a mouse jiggler or something, you know what I mean? If you are trying to make a bad employee the wrong hire work, you're going to fail. So nothing that I offer, nothing anyone offers is going to change that. But let's suppose, for example, you do actually hire people who are the right people.
Mhm.
Then it is a question of leadership. And there is a book that I will mention to you that is not necessarily about leadership, but it is very important if you want to be an engineering leader. And the book is called Flow. It is by a Hungarian, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And in it, he named this concept of a flow state. Flow states are so incredibly powerful when you're a developer. It is that feeling of, I look up at noon, I've done a whole day's worth of work. I didn't go to the bathroom, I didn't fidget, I didn't get something from the kitchen, but look at what I created. And that, if you can inspire that in your team, you're going to win.
Yeah.
And part of what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote when he said, okay, I've studied Michael Jordan, I've studied, all these high performers. There is a commonality to how they get in this state. And one of them, we can go over the others if you'd like, but one of them that's very relevant to leading engineering is you have to believe the work is meaningful.
Yeah.
So if you as a leader can connect this Jira ticket, this Asana linear ticket with the meaning of the company, we are here to solve the problem of the air quality in Delhi. We're here to solve, some problem that you connect with. And you go, this may just be today's, journey. Today's journey is this, but where it's leading is this thing that we all want. That's leadership, because then people are like, yeah, give me the tools I want to go solve.
Yeah. I think even in sports, they are talking about the state of flow and talking about when you're fully connected. In the other part, they say connected with the universe, connected with the energy, connected with the electromagnetic field, or whatever. There are different names and people are giving. Spiritual people have a different way of looking at it. But end of the day,
can I tell you one thing? The first time I experienced this was before I knew the term flow state. I was on American Airlines flight. Mm-hmm. I had some designs to do, some simple mock-ups to do to illustrate this feature that I wanted, right? Plane takes off. I'm working on my little laptop and the Wi-Fi is out and we land. And I was like, what happened? We just took off. We've been in the air like 30 minutes. We've been in the air 2 hours and 50 minutes. We arrived in San Francisco. It was almost a 3-hour flight. If you had asked me, I would have said, we just took off. I remember taking off because all my designs were done. It's the only thing I thought about. And when I landed, there's actually a favorite restaurant of mine that's very close to San Francisco Airport. I could go there and not feel the weight of, I have to get back to the hotel room to finish the designs. I could go there and say, I'd like a lobster roll, please, and enjoy my dinner, which was great. And that's one of those things that when you have experienced it, whether as a leader you've seen it in your team or you're an IC who has experienced it, you want that again. You go, how can I do that in 2 hours and 50 minutes, do something I thought would take me all night?
Absolutely. And people say, and it works, there's a dedicated process to creating it. Like if you watch tennis matches and you see Rafael Nadal placing his bottles, one of the examples, and before adjusting his knickers and the headband and so on. So there's a dedicated process. I do this. The mind starts to follow. This is going to happen, and I'm in a flow. And 99 out of that. It happens when you have those anchors in place. So yes, that's a real thing. And if you can put that into the practice of corporate world, and especially in the remote world, there's nothing like that.
Can I tell you a funny film story about that?
Sure.
One of the hacks around how to train your brain to get into that is what you said. It's the ritual. I do this, I adjust my headband, I do the thing, you sort of like you train your brain, we're going into that state, right? One part of that that's pretty well documented now is physical space.
Yeah.
And one of the big pitfalls, one of the dangers of working at home, working remotely, and I was guilty of this, is that sometimes you blur your physical space. Like I would be in the kitchen in the morning making breakfast, and then I'd have my laptop and I'd work at the kitchen table for a while. Then I'd come upstairs to my office later. At the end of the day, I would look at the sofa in the living room and say, oh, it looks comfortable. And I'd put my laptop on my lap and I'd work there. And it didn't train my brain to say I'm going to that state. And I'll tell you, when I was working, I produced the digital effects for Independence Day. Got along very well with the writer, director, producer. and we set up a company together to do digital effects.
Mhm.
They had trained their brains to do the creative state in this particular villa in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Apparently, I've never been there. Beautiful white villa pool. And they said, there's a room there where the light comes in a certain way in the morning. And we've written Universal Soldier there. We've written Stargate there. And they went, Roland told his assistant, Joey, we have to go write the next movie, go rent that villa. And Joey
Wow.
came back on Friday and said, someone rented it already. And it was like around the office, it was this, hue and cry. And Roland called his attorney, this guy, John Deemer, who's a fantastic attorney, and said, John, buy the villa. By Monday, Roland owned that villa. I don't know what happened to the people that were renting it, but they were gone. And they went down there and wrote Independence Day.
Wow.
And I've
That's
seen that
amazing.
repeatedly, especially with writers, with the creative process, whether you're creating code, I imagine, or definitely I've seen with writers, there is that sense of like, that is one way to help your brain drop in is like, I now am very disciplined when I'm doing a certain kind of work, I'm working coding, I sit here in my office and my brain
Yeah.
says, we're in that state. Got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, we talked about the trust dimension and we talked about the productivity dimension,
Yep.
but there's also this aspect of privacy because sometimes, of course, that's in a state or that's in a relationship when there's lack of trust or it's early on, when employee feels, because you mentioned the kitchen, you mentioned the home environment, and in that home environment, there's my dog or my cat or my kid coming around.
Yeah.
And that creates a sense of vulnerability, a sense of, is my privacy protected? So, how do you manage or how do you handle that dimension? Because you can have the trust, you want the productivity, but that's from the corporate side of things, the one who wants the work. But the one who's doing the work, he wants to be in the flow, but he also wants to be accepting or being okay to let himself be vulnerable.
Yeah, it's funny you bring this up because here in the U.S., something happened this week. There was in the NFL, there was a draft, and one of the coaches, and I'm not a big sports person, but this was like front page news. One of the coaches of one of these professional teams apparently was on the sofa on his iPad as the draft is going on, and his son saw the phone number of one of the guys being drafted on television. He's looking at his dad's iPad. He took the phone number and prank called the NFL player while he's on TV.
Wow.
The team was fined $250,000. That coach was fined $100,000. And you can imagine the coach is sitting there on his iPad and he was just not conscious of, oh, my son is sitting here. What are the chances he's going to prank call an NFL player on television right now? Right? So I can't tell you that I've heard of any system that has not been breached, that there hasn't been some mouse that's smarter than the mousetrap. And what you bring up, I'm not the brilliant mind that's going to say, oh, this encoding or this security system, this key is going to solve that. I think it is, we just have to do the best that we can relative to the sensitivity of the data. If I were holding nuclear launch codes, I would not be on this podcast.
No, I agree with you. I think it's a lot to do with personal responsibility.
Yeah.
We do talk about a lot on privacy, the technical side, the legal side, and end of it, explain all the scenarios, what we can imagine. But what you will encounter in the real life would be completely different. And then when you're caught off guard, and in that situation, that's when you have to make your decision and protect privacy. Because of course, we tell don't access the Wi-Fi on your port, but everybody does. We tell don't give your passwords or payments when you're on unsecured networks, but many people do.
Yeah.
So there are rules, there are guidelines, but then there are realities, and that's where the privacy or trust dimension needs to be protected, and that's where we count on people to make the right choices at the right moment.
Yes.
Like the example you're talking of iPad, and somebody looking at it. Nowadays we have privacy protected screens, so only you can see, nobody from left, right, or top
Yeah.
can
If
see
you're
it.
off access.
Yeah. So solutions like those are there, but it's up to you to choose how, say, relevant it is in your situation. Of course, it's relevant in every situation, but you have to judge how exposed you are in your environment. So, if I may ask, in the Sukha company that you have, what exactly do you do? Because it's wonderful to talk about this trust, this dimension of productivity and remote working. But what exactly do you do, and what can people reach out to you for?
There's a very kind question for you to ask. What we did was we took a lot of these concepts around how to get into a flow state. And
Mm-hmm.
there's there's a body of research on different things that can help. For example, music. There's a lot of research around 60 to 90 beats per minute, certain key
Mm-hmm.
signatures, non-vocal music. There
Mm-hmm.
are a bunch of people who believe very strongly in Pomodoro timers and certain kinds of timers. Time boxing
Mm-hmm.
is a really important idea, monotasking. So what we did is we put all these things together that, the top 12 books talk about. We said, don't buy the top 12 books necessarily. We took the concepts, we put them into a simple web app. It's like 30 cents a day. And it provides you what you need. There's a smart assistant, an
Mm-hmm.
LLM-based assistant that greets you, helps you organize your tasks, helps suggest things when it says, oh, Punit, I've been watching. You happen to work best in the mornings. And by the way, this playlist of music, you're the most efficient when you listen to sonic caffeine or ambient atmosphere. Do you want me to put that on for you?
Mm-hmm.
And it helps you optimize day over day, week over week, as it gets to know you and says, oh, maybe Punit, you're a writer, right? And it says, oh, the blog posts that you do a daily blog, your blog posts, you actually write best in the afternoon. Maybe in the afternoons, you've formulated your thoughts. Well, in the morning, you have writer's block. Let me book the afternoon slot for your blog. So that assistant then guides you through the music, the timers, assigning times to things, because when you time box, you generally do finish within the time you box. And also, notifies you when you open up Facebook or something in the middle of working, or YouTube. It sort of nudges you and says, do you really need to be in Facebook right now? And the result is Sukhas is a Sanskrit word. And why that was important to me is I met my wife in yoga. For our honeymoon, we went to Bali. And, there's a lot of yoga to do there. It's an important part of my life. My dad has practiced since he was 8 years old in Multan. And he's 80 something now. And when we were going on our honeymoon, I said to Laura, we have this early version of the platform running with a temporary name. I want to name it something proper, not, Focus app or Flow State app or Productivity Mate, just, some of those awful names, right? And I said, I think during this period of time, no one's going to bother me because they know I'm on my honeymoon. Maybe my unconscious mind will come up with that weird idea when we're doing something. Would you be okay if on the first day I speak to a couple of our early users and ask them, what do you love about this? Why are you here? She said, great. If that feeds your mind, do it. So I spoke to a couple of them the first day, 3 of them. The third person I spoke to, and I said, I only want 10 minutes, just short conversation. I asked the questions, and about 8 minutes in, I was wrapping up. I was like, Punit, thank you so much for your time. This is really helpful. And he said to me, you asked the wrong questions. And I was like, okay, what's the right question? He said, you should have asked me, why do I pay you? And I said, it's only 30 cents a day. I wasn't really thinking that's a big thing, but okay, why do you pay me? And he said, at 3 o'clock, I can be playing with my children who are 2 and 4, or at 6 o'clock, I can feel, where did the day go? He said, the difference is, did I open your app in the morning? Because it stops me from doing those little things that make my whole day go. My kids are not going to be 2 and 4 forever. I want to be here. I want to read books with them. I want to watch videos with them. And that's why I pay you. So at 3 o'clock, I have that time with them. And that, when I was talking to Laura that night, I said, there's this guy I spoke to who is more articulate about what I do than I am. She said, that's Sukha. We hear that concept along with prana and dharma and karma and everything. She's like, that is self-fulfillment. That is a feeling of, I'm doing the thing I'm meant to do. I'm very good at it and I can do it with ease. And that's why I call my company the Happiness Company, the Sukha Company. So that is ultimately what I do, is help people, give them the tools, but the tools are just the path to walk on. The goal is Sukha.
That's nice. That's so kind. It's so nice and so touching. So you're nudging me to use the app, and we will see. Now, if somebody needs to find the app and contact you, what's the best way?
It's really easy. The Sukha Company website is thesukha.co. The Sukha Company. And by the way, if there is anyone that wants to learn more about anything I said, they don't even have to be interested in my platform. My email address is very public. It's Steven@thesukha.company. They can email me if they're like, oh, I'd love to read that book by the Hungarian guy. What was the name? Email me. If they want to know some blog post about Cal Newport or tell me more about time boxing, I work very hard to return all my emails in 24 hours if I'm not traveling or sick. And I will not promise a 19-paragraph email with the story of my life, but if someone asks me, tell me more about that book, I will happily send them a link to the book.
Perfect. So with that, I would say it was a time well spent and in a very good direction. With a lot of deep, insightful conversation touching philosophy, spiritualism, flow, you name it, human behavior, and of course the world of AI and privacy and trust,
Mm.
all coming together and being connected. Uh, so I can only say for now, thank you so much for your time, and it's been a wonderful conversation.
It was an honor to be
So,
here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you liked the show, feel free to share it with a friend and write a review. If you have already done so, thank you so much. And if you did not like the show, don't bother and forget about it. Take care and stay safe. Fit for Privacy helps you to create a culture of privacy and manage risks by creating, defining, and implementing a privacy strategy that includes delivering scenario-based training for your staff. We also help those who are looking to get certified in CIPPE, CIPM, and CIPT through on-demand courses that help you prepare and practice for certification exam. Want to know more? Visit www.fit4privacy.com. That's www.fit4privacy.com. If you have questions or suggestions, drop an email at hello@fit4privacy.com. Until next time, goodbye.